just a heads up that I'm recording. And we're doing that because if someone has missed the meeting accidentally, we want to be able to include them. And also it might be useful to refer back to this discussion later. So we foreshadowed a little bit about the course project yesterday. And part of what we talked about is that we're going to be doing community partnerships rather than volunteering. And Kristin is going to tell us more about what distinguishes those concepts. We also talked about the difference between doing kind of volunteering and doing service learning. And the idea behind kind of acknowledging that we're not the experts in the room and learning from our community partners. Kristin has been, Kristin, how long have you been Director of Service Learning?
I have been on staff here for 21 years, but I've been director since 2003. So whatever that is. 17
years. Okay. So Kristin Harper has been Director of Service Learning for about 17 years. So she is, speaking of learning from experts in the room, Kristin is absolutely gonna be the expert in the room on what service learning means and what you can expect from a service learning experience. Kristin, just a heads up, a lot of our questions from students were about how to engage in service learning opportunities and how to get connected with service learning here at BSC, especially opportunities like service learning abroad, service learning related to internships. Those were some questions we got. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Kristin Harper, who I appreciate very much for being here. Kristin, how would you like to handle questions from students?
Well, as I was thinking, thank you, first of all, for inviting me here on your second day of class. Good grief, you guys don't even know each other yet, but appreciate being able to be here. And I also appreciate sort of being forced to think about explaining what service learning is and what the college community relationship looks like. And I have to confess that I got all excited about that. And so I did a little bit of digging and sort of have kind of a historical context to present to you. And I really want this to be useful to you guys. So if at any point you're like, boring, I'm done, just raise your hand and we can shift, because that's all about, you know, it's all about you guys getting the information that you need and that you want. And so there will certainly be time to talk about the questions that you submitted. But if it's all right, I would like to start with that kind of historical context. Does that make sense?
Yes, terrific. Would you like students to raise their hand and let you acknowledge questions? Or would you like to have students type questions in chat if they have them?
I think that I don't have access to chat because I'm a guest.
Oh, is that right? How do I, yeah. I don't know how to change your role. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's no problem. If you'll just raise your hand, I will try to watch for that. But I have, I'm trying to share my screen with this, let's see. Can you see that PowerPoint?
I can. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Terrific.
That's so crazy. It won't let me look at the team screen and the PowerPoint screen at the same time. So what you're going to have to do, Stephanie, if you see a hand raised, will you just
let you know?
Yeah.
I absolutely will. Meantime, I'm trying to figure out how to change your role.
Okay.
So please go right ahead while I troubleshoot that.
Let's see. Keep trying to maybe split the screen. But anyway, okay, so as I said, kind of thinking about sort of like, why are we here where we are in terms of how we relate to the community, how we relate to community partners, how we relate to the neighborhood that we find ourselves in, how we relate to the outside world, everything outside the gates. I picked up this book, which booklet, I guess is what it is. It's about 30 pages. That Guy Hubbs, who before G.K. Armstrong was our archivist, Guy was our archivist for several years. And he wrote this several years ago, just kind of as a history of sort of the values of BSC. And he entitled it A Compelling Idea. And at the very beginning of the book, he quotes the very first president of BSC, who actually was the president of Southern University, which is a predecessor of BSC. I'll talk about that in a minute. And this was in 1861. Think about what's happening in 1861 in the world, okay? But he says in his commencement address for the second class that was graduating from Southern University, he says, the great point to be considered is not so much what you shall get as what you shall become, what you shall do to bless your generation. And Guy's point in sort of outlining this history is that we have always been about educating students to make the world a better place. And, you know, that's certainly a laudable goal. And we want our students to leave with a BSc degree, equipped to share their gifts and be good citizens, and wherever they find themselves, in whatever career they find themselves, to do whatever it takes to make your community better. So that's a long held value at BSC. How many of you have ever heard of noblesse oblige? I'm trying to. Well, I wish I could see you, but I can't figure out how to do a split screen. So that quote, while you know, initially you might think, oh, that's very positive and very noble, it makes me think of this phrase. And noblesse oblige is the moral obligation of those of high birth, powerful social position, etc., to act with honor, kindliness, and generosity. So it's sort of like there are a lot of power dynamics inherent in noblesse oblige. It's like it's our obligation, because we've been given so much, to share with those who have less. And again, that is not necessarily a bad thing. However, it sets up a power dynamic that can be problematic. And that's part of what I want to talk about today. So here, really quick, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but kind of a history lesson. Southern University started in Greensboro, Alabama, which is in the Black Belt in, I think, Perry County, I think. And that building there on the left was kind of the main building of Southern University. Started in 1856. That first graduating class was not until 1861. So think about Greensboro, Alabama in 1856. Just actually unmute yourself. What do you think some of the industry in the Black Belt of Alabama was in 1856? Anybody?
Cotton.
Cotton.
Friends, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, so the people who began the university were likely, I don't know this for sure, but were likely plantation owners who participated in the economy of the South, which means they probably owned slaves. So I just think that's important to think about in terms of the beginnings of our 150 plus year institution. So that Southern University continued to exist. That building, incidentally, was destroyed by a tornado in '73. I've actually driven down there to try to see the site just because I was interested, and frankly, it's a little creepy. But anyway, so that's where that started. There was also something called Birmingham College, which was here on the hilltop, here in this physical location that began in 1897. And that building that you see was the main building of Birmingham College. It was actually torn down in 1928, and on that site, Munger Hall was constructed. And Munger is the building where our president and provost have their offices. You may or may not have a class there or have been there, but there's an auditorium in the bottom. So that's the site where Munger was, or is, excuse me. Here's a picture of Munger. So in 1918, we're a Methodist sort of institution, and so the Methodists of North and South Alabama decided that they would merge and move the institution to Birmingham, and that became Birmingham Southern College. So since 1918, we've been here in this spot as Birmingham Southern College. So now you can answer trivia questions at, with coffee with your professor about the history of BSE. Okay, how many people, well, I can't see you, so I'm not going to ask it that way. Whoops. Are familiar with the concept of redlining. So redlining was really a concept that the sort of banking industry used to look at a map and figure out where they thought investment was a good idea and where investment was really risky. So in terms of loans for people to build homes. So this is a map from 1938 of redlining. You don't see the red lines on here, but you see the different color coding. So the green is first grade. That means that's the best area to invest. And then blue is second, third is yellow, and D is fourth. So just so you kind of get your bearings. Well, shoot, I can't even see if I can. Hold on. I hope you can see my cursor there. This is Birmingham. This is sort of downtown here.
We
Obviously,
can see your cursor, Kristin.
Good, thank you. Obviously, in 1938, there was no interstate, but if there was, the interstate would come through about here, the I-59, like towards Tuscaloosa this way, towards Gadsden that way. And again, this is downtown. So this area that's a good investment is Mountain Brook. And some of you may not be familiar with Birmingham's sort of neighborhoods and all, but just so you at least have heard this, and you can ask folks who are from Birmingham or have a little bit more experience. But the green here is Mountain Brook, which is the most wealthy suburb of Birmingham. And then I'll finally get to that next. Let's see. So I'm zooming in a little bit here to see where Birmingham Southern is. This is where we are. So again, the interstate would come down like this. And the areas right around the college are sort of either second or third grade investments. But all this other area is really, is not worth investing in. It's basically what this map says. And the different categories were something like, investment worthy, declining, one other thing, and then hazardous. The pink areas are hazardous for investing. So that just goes to show sort of where the banking industry, where resources were available and not available, starting all the way, in the early 1900s. Okay, this is going so slowly. Oh yeah, there's BSC. I made a little circle. Now this map, here's the interstate, like I said. This is downtown. This is I-65. And Birmingham Southern is right over here. This map is a racial segregation map. And this is one of many that the Center for Public Service at the University of Virginia published several years ago. You can look at all different cities across America. But green dots are Black owned property. Well, not necessarily owned property, but places where Black people live. And blue dots are places where white people live. And then, of course, there's red, Asian, and orange, Hispanic, and then brown, other race. So you can see, this is from, I think, census data from 2010. You can see how tremendously segregated the city is. And if you remember where the good investment areas were, they were right here. And most of the areas along here were hazardous investing. So just give you a little bit of context about the local community where we find ourselves, and sort of how all that has shaken out. So I already told you, but Birmingham Southern is right here, and look at the differences there. I just think that's so fascinating and interesting. We do have a little more diversity than the rest of the city. Maybe here is pretty diverse. That's right around UAB. But you see it's mostly white, surrounded by mostly Black. All right. So again, probably not news to you, but I think it's really important to point out those dynamics. So I've got a couple of timelines here that we'll kind of rush through. And if you're more interested in learning more about this, I would be happy to talk to you about it. I'm really kind of connected to the history of this place in a lot of ways. So I love to talk about it. So if you think about sort of the early 60s, what was going on in the world? All kinds of, civil rights movement was in full swing. In September of '63, the bombing of the 16th Street Church happened, which is less than a mile from here. That's also when schools began to be desegregated in Birmingham, which meant a couple of Black children would go to a white school. That's what desegregation meant at that time. And it was, you may have seen sort of children being escorted by National Guardsmen. I mean, it was not an easy sort of process. But so that's happening. Remember, here we are up on the hilltop while all this is going on. In the 1970s, somewhat as a result of all that civil rights strife, the neighborhood around BSC, which was at that point very white, middle class, began to change. And I'm sure you've heard the word white, or the phrase white flight. So many white families that lived in College Hills and Bush Hills right around here began to move out to the suburbs, to Vestavia, Homewood, Mountain Brook, Trussville. And so that it was a long process. It didn't happen overnight, but it was sort of 70s and 80s. Now, as this is happening, one of the trustees of the college gave the college a gift of 160 acres in Shelby County. Now, Shelby County, we are in Jefferson County, and Shelby County is just to the south of us. So like parts of Hoover, Helena, that's Shelby County. And so this gift of 160 acres, because this trustee felt like, things are really kind of dicey where you are, maybe it's best to move. And the college and its administration considered that for couple of years, but they couldn't find a buyer. They actually offered it to Miles College, and Miles tried to raise enough money, and it never worked out. So there was really no buyer. So in 1975, they decided, okay, we're going to quit working on this, trying to sell the campus. We're going to stay here. And I think that was a terribly consequential decision. Can you imagine what Birmingham Southern would be like if we were in Shelby County? It'd be just very different. Incidentally, at the same time, Samford University, which is in Homewood, moved. It was Howard University before, and it moved. And I don't know where in the city it was before it moved, but it moved to its present location in Homewood, in one of those southern suburbs. So 75, we decide to stick around here in West End, or in the West. Now, there wasn't always a fence around campus, but in 1978 that goes up. And remember, things are changing for many reasons. More of which I can talk about. Fence goes up and one security. So all this is going on. Now, look, I got those backwards in terms of time, but in 1970, a chaplain was appointed here at BSC, and he was really interested in helping students get engaged in the local community, knowing, I mean, remember, it's a little dicey. The relationships are different, and there's a lot of kind of transition going on. So the chaplain begins what is called the Good Neighbor program, and they create some scholarships for students to sort of engage in the community. They work with nursing homes and community centers, tutoring, things like that. I know this because that chaplain was my father. So I actually, as a young elementary school aged person, lived on campus, and my dad was the chaplain in the late 70s. So before, you know what the entrance to campus looks like now, right? It's going to take a minute for this to load. So you get off of the interstate and you turn, and oh goodness, it's going very slowly. Well, all right, you know what that entrance looks like now. It's just that one entrance at Bruno Drive. Oh no, okay, we're gonna not worry about that. Let me go. Can you see my screen changing?
Kristin, I can't see your screen changing.
Okay, that's all right. Here we go. Watch this. It's totally gonna be worth it, I promise. Okay, so this is the entrance to campus now. Can you see that? It's a Google map.
Right now we're showing
my face.
There it is.
Okay. So, so this is the entrance now. Well, before 1979, when that fence went up, this is what the entrance looked like. Now, this is a picture in present day BSC, but this is the map, here's BSC, here's the interstate, this is Arkadelphia. So the entrance was really on the southern end of the campus where this little guy's standing. And
we're not seeing the image.
You're not? Oi.
No, I think it's still loading perhaps.
Is it, okay, let me try again. Thank you for your patience. And
thank you for going to the trouble to illustrate this for us.
Okay, let me try again. Let me know if you can see another shot of campus from the southern end.
Yes.
Okay, so this is Munger, hard to see way up the hill, but you see that road? That used to come all the way here, and this was the entrance. And if you go down that way and look back up, it was pretty stately, you know, sort of you come from the neighborhood and you come up the hilltop into this, you know, really impressive building that was sort of the headquarters of the school. But you would never know that that was an entrance if you look at it now, right? Because there's this fence. Incidentally, the president's home, which is right here, you can barely see the garage there. It also had a driveway. Well, I'm not going to make that work. A driveway that came all the way down to the to 8th Avenue as well. So that's just something to let's see, I'm gonna stop it and start my PowerPoint again. I hope this is working for you guys. See the PowerPoint again, anybody?
Yes.
Okay. So that just think about sort of how that shifts how students and faculty see themselves as in relation to the community. It's very different. So I promise this isn't going to last much longer, but just a little bit more information about kind of how we see ourselves in terms of service learning from the 80s to now. In 85, an student organization called Southern Volunteer Services began, and they had different ongoing projects like Meals on Wheels, Habitat for Humanity, tutoring at local community centers and schools. In 1987, the very first, what we now call interim in service learning happened, where we took a group of students somewhere else to do service projects and to learn about different communities. That first one was in St. Petersburg, Florida, on a Habitat for Humanity project. But a school in Uganda, unfortunately, we haven't been able to travel to, and we won't in January, but to get back to that. In 1996, the Office of Service Learning is established. We had Southern Volunteer Services, which was a student organization, but now we've got an office with staff to help coordinate community engagement work. And we shift our language from ongoing projects to ongoing partners. Again, think about what that shift means in terms of how we see ourselves in the community. 2007, one of our trustees and his family gave $1 million to establish, Derry and Pete Bunting established the Bunting Center for Engaged Study and Community Action, which is this office in the Krulak Institute. And that enabled us to help faculty to develop semester courses that had service components and things like that. In 2015, we started a Bonner Leader programs. I know Lauren is a Bonner Leader. Those are service scholarships for a small group of students that follow a developmental model of community engagement throughout their time at BSC. And then in 2017, just recently, we joined the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty and established the Poverty Studies program, which you don't even know you're a part of because you're in this Intro to Poverty Studies class. So these are just my kind of phrases and descriptions of how community engagement was viewed throughout the history of BSC. I think early on and really all the way through the First World War, we sort of saw service as our obligation because we were blessed and we needed to sort of share, we needed to bless our generation. My light just went off. So noblesse oblige through the 40s. And then sort of up until the 70s, it's sort of noblesse oblige, but a little bit more modern. It's important for us to give back. It was our responsibility to give back to the community. I've always found that phrase interesting because it sort of assumes that we're not part of the community. So anyway, there's that. And then in the 70s and 80s, we wanted to be good neighbors. Remember the Good Neighbor Scholarship Program? We wanted to still be in service for the community. In the 90s, we shifted to service learning, which encourages us to think about service with the community, not for, but working together towards common good. And in the 2000s, I generally refer to our work as community engagement, because I understand all of us, whether you live in Birmingham or not, by virtue of the fact that you attend Birmingham Southern College, you are a member of this community. And so to be a good citizen, to sort of learn those skills and values of citizenship, we engage in community together. And so community engagement seems to me to be a better, language is important, to be better language to describe what we're doing. And so whatever, as we move towards the future, we are really striving for mutual and reciprocal partnerships with community organizations, with neighborhood associations, with schools in Uganda, not just locally, but around the world. We want to be in partnership because we have needs. We need to learn about the world. We need to understand what people who live differently than we do are, what they have to navigate in the world. And we also have things that we can offer, and our community friends and neighbors and organizations, they have needs. Sometimes they need volunteers. Sometimes they need somebody to do some research for them. But they also have things to offer us. And so we want, and we really try to make all of those connections to community organizations mutual and reciprocal. Okay, I've just yammered long enough. I want to know what kind of questions you guys have or reactions to any of that. I do have about a 10-minute video presentation by one of our alums that I think illustrates all of that very nicely. I'm happy to send you a link to that later, or we can watch it, however that kind of unfolds. But maybe we'll take a minute just so you don't fall asleep and kind of get engaged and get your reaction to any of that or questions about it.
Kristin, before we go into discussion, if I could ask you a couple of questions, would you be willing to share your PowerPoint presentation in addition to me sharing the recording? That can be more accessible for some of our students who are more visual learners.
Yes.
And I would also like to ask if you could share a link to that video and we can have a discussion about it on Thursday as part of our reading discussion. One of us is frozen, me or you, I can't tell whom.
Kristin is frozen.
Kristin is frozen, okay. Hopefully Kristin will come back. If everyone can kindly participate in discussion, it's really nice if you're able to unmute your camera so that we can see who's speaking. That's good for people who may have hearing difficulties. So if you want to ask or answer a question, if you're willing to unmute your camera, that would be helpful. And just be sure to keep your volume muted when you're not speaking. Let me see if I can find Kristin and get her back. Show participants. Kristin Harper. Oh. Kristin Harper has left and come back. So, or has left and hopefully will rejoin us in a moment. So I'm trying to provide some context in the meeting chat, especially for people who may not be familiar with U.S. or Southern history. And I hope that that is useful. Let's see. Oh, Kristin Harper is calling. Let's see if I can. Sorry, everyone. We're doing our best. This is not ideal, but I think Kristin is back.
I am back. I am
Kristin,
so sorry.
Welcome back.
Goodness gracious. Good thing I brought my laptop. So
yeah,
my office computer just froze. I really apologize for that. But I guess you guys are going to get used to that for quite some time. So hopefully.
We are all trying our best, and we are just remaining very positive throughout this process. So there's no need to apologize. We all understand that we're all trying.
Sure.
Okay.
So I fell away when you asked about sharing the PowerPoint, which I'm happy to do, as well as the video link.
Terrific. Everyone, I don't want to take up any more time. I think we all understand how to do this. Let's have questions and thoughts and reactions for Kristin Harper.
I was really interested to learn about the whole fence thing, because I've always wondered, when I take an Uber on campus to campus, it takes you to the other side of the gate and not to the actual entrance. And I was always wondering what was up with that. So it's cool to know that that's why, because I always thought something was weird with that.
So I'm not quite sure I understand. When you have an Uber, where do they pick you up?
They take you on the other side of the campus, not to the main entrance.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I guess because GPS hasn't actually changed to the entrance where it is.
Fascinating. Wow. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah. I really wish somebody, hint, would take this on as a research project, and because I just think it's fascinating, in terms of how we see ourselves in the neighborhood and how the neighborhood sees us. All that matters.
For my social majors considering senior research, that would be a terrific alternative.
I'm a little older. I actually remember when the other gate was actually open, just maybe 20 something years ago. And I can't remember when they closed that other entrance, but I don't know. I'm not gonna say I was always bothered by it, but I just hate that they actually closed that other.
Right. Yeah, there was
side.
a gate that actually opened down there. And honestly, I went to college at BSC in the late 80s, and the fence was up then, but Fraternity Row is actually where the lake is now, and there was a gate at the end of that street onto 8th Avenue, and the gate would open every once in a while. But in terms of kind of all the main traffic, if you wanted to come to visit BSC, you would have to go up to Bruno Drive. But yeah, I remember when my dad was the chaplain in the 70s, we lived on Greensboro Road, and I would walk to the College Hills grocery store in the afternoon as a 7-year-old, which is the College Hills grocery store is kind of catty-cornered from campus across from the McCoy Center. And, there was no fence there. So I really miss that. So anyway, I don't mean to belabor that, but I think, it shifts kind of how we think of ourselves, for sure.
Absolutely. Other thoughts and questions related to Kristin's presentation? I think it's also okay when we're ready to shift the conversation to kind of bigger questions about service learning. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Terrific. Yes. Someone has raised their hand? No? If there are no other immediate thoughts, then I will share some discussion questions. And I'm going to, they're posted in chat, but I'm not going to identify you when I read your question. But if you would like to follow up on your question, please feel free to claim it. So one question is in the article, I had them read the article from Communications by Hannah Wolfson about your experience with the Bunting Center. So that's from a couple of years ago, but that was the article I asked them to read before meeting you.
Was that the one where I just talk about Birmingham?
It's the one where you talk about service learning and kind of the history of service learning at BSC. So I thought it was relevant. I hope you agree.
I'm just curious which one it was. I'm not sure I remember. So yeah, I stand by. Yes.
You can't deny it now. They've already read it. So one student has asked, in the article by Hannah Wolfson, it says that the real goal of service learning is to go beyond basic volunteering to build relationships with community members so that students' worldviews are expanded and collaborative partnerships to emerge to address community challenges together. The question is, Kristin, do you feel that most service learning projects produce this result? What would you suggest to students who are attempting to deepen their relationships and work with community partners?
That is a great question. And I would say that that is an aspirational statement. Our goal is to be in partnership with community members, community organizations to make our community a better place. However, you are here in college for 4, maybe 5 years. You might only be at Birmingham Southern for a semester or 2 or 3 years, depending on what your personal journey looks like. And so really our projects are the things that we work on together are bounded by semesters, right? So in this class, you're going to work on some community partnerships, going to work on some things together, hopefully. But when you are done with this class, you may or may not want to continue working on that project or with that partner. And that's just the way higher education works. But I would say that we, through people like Dr. Hansard and other faculty members who are interested in working with community partners, we try to extend that relationship. We try to continue. Maybe the students change, but the relationship continues. So to answer the question about what I recommend for students, I recommend that you find a place, a group, a neighbor, somebody sort of off in the real world that you can build a relationship with and stick with. Maybe it's an organization, maybe you're tutoring at Bush Hill STEAM Academy. Maybe you have the same child there that you work with for 2 years. So you're building that relationship. Maybe it's, I know both Alexandra and Lauren have been working with Greater Birmingham Ministries on some of their community organizing and voter education. To continue that work, which I know both of you are doing, that's a way to continue to build the relationship. So rather than seeing yourself as, I'm going to go do a service project today, which there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with volunteering. We need volunteers to get things done. But if you're really interested in learning about and being transformed by your relationships in the community, then it's got to be more than a 1-day, 1 semester thing.
Thank you, Kristin. And if I can just say something about that, part of my goal in this course is to build ongoing partnerships with community partners. And that may not look like working with them every fall. With the same partner every fall, but it means that every fall I get in touch with all the partners I've worked with in the past and say, hey, just following, or every summer I get in touch with them and just say, hey, I have another class coming up. I wondered if there's anything else we can do. I wondered if there's anything you have going on that would be, mutually beneficial for us that we can partner on. So I make an attempt at an institutional kind of level to maintain those partnerships and plug students into them. So just a little behind the scenes, that's part of what CRULAC helps me to do. And that's part of what I try to do as a professor.
Yeah.
So
that's the ideal. And it's messy. It doesn't always work out. Your schedule might change and you can't do what you have been doing this semester, next semester, or the partner that Stephanie's working with, doesn't have room to kind of shepherd a student or two along that semester. So it's messy. It doesn't always work out like we like, but if we keep those values of partnership and mutuality kind of as our North Star, that's the main thing. And then you throw in COVID into all of this. Oh my gosh.
What a perfect lead in to the next couple of questions. We actually had a couple of questions that I'm going to kind of synthesize. How do you plan to navigate finding service learning opportunities in the midst of a pandemic? How is service learning going to look for the rest of the school year? And I love the way this question is framed, Kristin, because I have encouraged us as a group to be very solution focused. What are some of the benefits of service learning, both for community partners and students during a pandemic?
Yeah. Well, a pandemic is a community challenge. That's what it is. We are trying to figure out how we can be healthier as a community, and there are real life and death consequences to that. So in a lot of ways, this presents us with a unique and really focused opportunity. Now, you also have to think about safety of community members, safety of employees of community partners, your safety, faculty member safety. So, we have to be smart about how we interact. And officially, our office is encouraging people to continue to work with community partners, but doing it remotely or virtually. And there are lots of ways to do that. To be perfectly honest, this is the question that has haunted me since March, because I don't want to miss this opportunity, but I also, it's different. It's like there's no way you can do a one-day volunteer project. But anyway, so I actually have a list of options, virtual and remote options, that really fall more in line with the kind of volunteer project that I can send to you guys too, just so you sort of have that outlet. If you have been able to build a relationship with a community partner, and many of you probably have done this, but I just know about what Alexandra did this summer with GBM and what Lauren has worked with them as well. So their relationship has already been built, so they can continue to do the work, remotely, and it's kind of seamless. So if you've got a relationship with an organization, just communicate with them and say, gosh, this is the weirdest time. I'm sure you're struggling and we're struggling, and if there's anything I can do from here, can I update a volunteer handbook for you, or can I take notes at a Zoom meeting, a board meeting for you? Those kinds of things. So not sure, that was kind of a rambling answer, but it's a different time for sure. And I think I don't want to miss the opportunity to sort of realize the unique opportunities during this time.
So I just want to add on that a little bit and say a real beauty of partnership versus volunteering. Volunteering, it can work one of two ways. The community organization can say, hey, here's a job, come do the job, and we do the job and we're done. It's very time delimited. It's a particular time space that usually doesn't recur and doesn't lead to any kind of deeper connection. Or we can kind of take that expert role and plunk down a project on an organization. And this is really when volunteering and sometimes service learning can get really ugly. Is when someone like me, a friendly, well-intentioned, middle-class lady with a PhD, sits by herself in her office and thinks, what would be neat? What the community needs? Well, the thing is that despite my ability to do research, I don't really know what the community needs as well as the community knows what the community needs. Like I'm in the I promise this is relevant, but drawing on life experience in this pandemic, I'm now in the position of providing a lot of care for my grandmother who has dementia. And the main challenge with that is that she's not able to communicate her needs with me in an effective way. We can't communicate with each other in an effective way. So every mealtime, she knows exactly what she wants to eat and has no way to let me know what that could be. And so I have to just try to guess based on what she tends to like and what seems like a good idea to me, like nutritionally based on what she had for the last few meals. I just make a good guess. And, everything I feed her is appropriate, but she hates it and doesn't want to eat it. So she doesn't eat it, and it's worse than useless. And sometimes she spits at me. Because wouldn't you if someone were trying to force feed you something you didn't like? And this is an analogy for when we as kind of educated academics try to determine what a community needs based on research, based on hypotheses, based on previous experience. And we design our own project, and then we plunk that down on top of a community organization, when that community organization is already doing work. They already know what they need. They have a wish list, sometimes a literal one on Amazon. They have ongoing tasks and they know what support they need with those tasks. But if we fail to communicate in a meaningful way, in a way that acknowledges and honors their expertise and their kind of priorities, then we're going to have a relationship that is at best unhelpful, and at worst actually hurtful. Because if you're a community organization, you have to take the approach that, like, well, this project that these well-intentioned kids want to do is useless, but they're affiliated with a college that could be of use to us in the future. So we're going to put up with this absolutely useless volunteer project for them so they can have the warm, fuzzy experience. And then we'll just clean up after it later. So this can actually be burdensome. And we're asking, when we superimpose a service learning approach on that, we're not only saying, here, let us come, build a wall for you, despite the fact that we have no masonry experience. We're also saying, hey, teach us about your organization while we do this really useless project for you, and take your time to educate us. And it's just kind of an ultimate expression of privilege.
Absolutely.
And that's
damaging.
Yes. Yeah.
To both of us, to both sort of parties, right? Because it does nothing to shift our understanding of kind of the way the world is. And when you're in an intro to poverty studies class, it's doubly hard because you've got the issue of of poverty, of sort of economic security right there in the middle of it too. And a lot of times, remember that picture of the racial segregation of Birmingham Southern and the community. It's a lot of times there are racial implications too, right? And that makes it really challenging. So the best advice I can give anybody is be humble, be yourself, and listen. All we're trying to do is build relationships. That's why if that relationship building is at the heart of any kind of project or partnership or activity that we engage in, then that's a good thing.
Yes. And going back to what Kristin was saying about relationships and service during a pandemic, if you have a relationship with somebody and things change drastically, you negotiate that change together. You work together to navigate what you're going to do now. If you don't have an authentic relationship with somebody, then you're completely derailed by a major change. So the goal is to build authentic relationships with people who can work with us to navigate changing situations. The pandemic is an interesting, kind of crisis. It's a fascinating catastrophe, but because it's huge, it's undeniable, and everyone's talking about it and acknowledging it. Except perhaps the people who could actually do something about it. But we face sea changes all the time. We face changes in policy. We face changes in grant funding. We face changes in administration of the college. We face changes in curriculum. There are changes that we navigate with our partners all the time. And the key to successfully navigating any change is relationship. What questions do y'all have right now about service learning versus volunteering, about anything that's been discussed in class today, about your role as a service learner, about anything? Please do not be shy. Be very brave. You're not being very brave right now.
Well, we've been jabbering for quite some time. I want to know what you got. I mean, the other piece of this is that we have to call one another out when we're not, when we're violating the values that we say we believe. And so, there have been many times where students have called me out and, kind of reminded me, I thought we were supposed to not be the experts and not assume we knew what the community needed. I was like, shit, oh yeah. So, I think it's important for us to be real honest with one another, and, when we see things that don't feel right, to say so. So anyway, all that's kind of a prelude to the question. How do you feel about this? How do you feel Birmingham Southern's track record is for doing this kind of thing well? And I've learned to have a thick skin, and it won't bother me if, I want you to be honest is the point.
Honestly, I'm not aware of Birmingham Southern's track record as far as the community work. When I was accepted, or before I applied to the school, I was actually impressed with its role or on social issues, environmental issues pertaining this area, and that Birmingham Southern honored itself in its work and things that it did in the area, and that it was taking advantage and considered this area a resource for cultural, economic, environmental issues. So I'm happy, extremely shocked, considering the majority demographic here, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I'm very impressed as a person. This is what I'm looking to do. I'm from this area. I graduated from Ansley High School, and went to Bush, and also lived in the Woodlawn area. I moved a million times, but my end years were the west side of town. I live right on the other side of 3rd Avenue in West End. So I'm excited, and I do feel like I have a different perspectives because I've been the community, and then now I want to help the community. But everything has changed so much, even with just everything that's going on now. I'm like, what are they thinking? What? And then my husband is from this area also. He graduated from West End High School. So his thing, if he's coming home, I take the interstate, right? He takes 3rd Avenue all the way to McCullough because he has to keep his foot in the hood every single day. That's his thing, and I hate it. But I'm like, are you trying to get shot? Like, why you always have to drive your fancy car like all the time? Because people see him as he has a reputation, though. Yeah. So I'm excited. I know I'm just rambling, but I'm excited, and I'm glad that you acknowledge that you can't come in as the expert and tell people what they need to do, and that you really need to get an understanding of what people need and then work with them in that way. So I do like the partnering thing. Volunteering is this thing where I'm like, oh yeah, you come for one day and you disappear back to your lives and make you feel good, all warm and fuzzy. But for those who really want to understand how people think, what they need, and empathize with what's going on, I think this is you're doing good.
Well, thank you. You know, I think that's why I think Birmingham Southern has such an opportunity, because there are many of us, and I don't want to make huge generalizations, but there are many of us who sort of grew up in communities that were very homogenous, that where everybody kind of looks like me, and I didn't really, we had that experience. Well, that's one experience of living in America. There are lots of different experiences. And, when I was in school here, I felt like we needed to kind of go outside the gates to get that kind of different experience, to be enlightened, educated, to listen to another perspective, to share with somebody who might be different. But increasingly, we're not sort of there to the perfect community yet, but increasingly we have a more diverse student body, and very slowly we're getting a more diverse staff and faculty. And so we can have some of those conversations, even in our classes and on campus. It's important to get off campus and have them too, but just given where this country is right now, and given all the craziness, well, it's not craziness, it's sort of long overdue, raised consciousness around race and the power dynamics, and we need to have those conversations. And that's a part of community engagement too, is to try to figure out how you exist, how you make your community a more just and a place where everybody can kind of be their best selves. So again, rambling, but that's so helpful. Is it Tarika? It's so helpful to hear you talk about your experience, and at least your experience with sort of what BSC has been in the community.
Thank you, Tarika, and thank you, Kristin. Kristin, yesterday we had the opportunity to talk about kind of how we were going to conceive of ourselves as a class. And I wanted to just share that we are thinking of ourselves and framing ourselves as a team. And we talked about the fact that we're never going to see it as me against her, or me against him, or me against them. We're going to view every problem that comes up as us against the problem, us against the obstacle. And part of overcoming obstacles together, and part of honoring each other as a community and as a team, is I've always said that a friend is someone who will tell you that your skirt is stuck in your stockings, or that you have something in your teeth, and that anyone who won't tell you that is an associate at best, not a friend. A friend, a teammate, is someone who will tell you that you have done something insensitive, or that you have done something that may not have been thought through to the best of your ability, or that you have done something that may backfire. A friend is someone who will tell you things like that so that you can overcome that challenge together. And a friend and a teammate in this class is someone who will say that without judgment, while assuming that you are doing your best, but still call you out and still say, hey, that may not be the best approach. Have you thought about it this way? Or, hey, I get where you might be coming from, but that sucks. Don't do that. So a friend and a teammate shares and honors their teammates enough to let them know when they're doing something embarrassing.
Yeah.
So Kristin certainly helps me with accountability, and has made me a better educator and a better service learning worker, by helping me think through some of my approaches and some of my preconceptions. Kristin is someone I think of as a mentor, because she has gained those insights through years of hard work and introspection.
Well, you're very kind, and I would say all the same about you. I think that's part of what a good relationship does, right? I mean, I'm shifting very quickly, but I just remembered there are 2 additional slides on that PowerPoint that I'm not going to spend time on, but I want to at least say one word about before I send it to you, just so that it's not confusing. I'm going to see if I can. Can you see that?
We're seeing your picture for now, but I think it's low. Here we go. Great.
The paradigms of engagement.
Yes.
Okay. So this is, what I told you about all, I don't know why that's, do you see that blinking? That's very confusing.
It's not blinking for me.
Okay. The edge of my screen is like strobing.
Confusing.
The last 2 slides are from my kind of professional, like all the really smart people who do service learning. I told you sort of my experience and my understanding of history of this institution and where we are. But these are sort of some larger concepts that people in the field of community engagement and service learning have kind of worked out, and I think they're useful. So the paradigms of engagement. Technocratic and democratic, and we're talking about democratic small d, not Democrat as opposed to Republican, but democratic as, kind of sharing power. So, a technocratic approach is service for, a democratic approach is service with. A technocratic approach, we look at the needs first. A democratic approach, we, look at what we're all bringing first. So those are kinds of things to keep in mind when you build connections with folks off campus. I want to spend tons of time there. The other thing that I love this diagram because it reminds us to consider. Have we moved on to the so far, the kind of star diagram? Can you see that?
Yeah,
okay.
That's visible.
So we call that the so far model, but it reminds us that there are multiple stakeholders in anything that we do. And we have to consider the voice and the assets and the needs of each of those parties. So, and at best, this is a flat model. So, we're not starting with faculty member and then they're going to the students and then we'll talk to the community residents. But ideally, we're all going to get together around a table or around a Zoom call and talk together about the work we can do together. So just a couple of, I have to interject my my academic training there. So that's all.
Kristin, that's great. Thank you so much. And this is something that, with your permission, I can borrow these slides and we can talk about them more next Tuesday. In class. Thank you for making those resources available. Friends, we are almost out of time. Before we conclude, I want to thank everyone for coming. Thanks to those who participated, either by submitting questions early or by speaking in the meeting. I want to encourage you in future meetings to speak more. Kristin is a good friend and is someone who I trust with my students because she's wonderful. She also understands BSc students very well and works with college students day in, day out, all day, every day for years. So she understands your shyness and your reticence. In the future, it would be great to have more live questions. but I appreciate everyone's kind attention. I would just like to help make a better connection with Kristin Harper. Kristin, what is your, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if students wanted to have follow-up conversations with you about what you've talked about today, what would be the best way to do that for you?
Absolutely. Email me. Email me and we can set up a time to have a appropriately distanced coffee together, or a call like this, or Stephanie, I might love to just pop in on your class at some point later in the term, after you've kind of built some rapport and conversation. So yeah, and really, if ever, I would much rather have a difficult conversation than, everybody said, "Oh, that was great. That's good for you." So, bring it on. Anytime. kharper@bsc.edu.
I'm going to drop that in the chat at bsc.edu. Nope, there's a dot in there. All right. So thank you very much for visiting us. I think I speak for everyone when I say that you're invited to any class you would like to attend. I can also include you in future lab meetings as a guest, so that you can hear from our other community partners this semester if you're available. I'll get in touch with you about that after this call. Are there any last minute closing thoughts from anyone? If not, can we all take a moment to just say thanks to Kristin? And I will plan to see y'all in person tomorrow at our regularly scheduled time. Tomorrow is the only Thursday we will be meeting in person until the very end of the semester. But I would like to meet you in person on Thursday, tomorrow at 12:30. If there are no closing thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and end the conversation, and plan to see everyone tomorrow. Thanks very much, Kristin Harper.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kristin.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Bye,
tomorrow.
everyone. Oh, question?
Oh, no, I said see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Look forward to another discussion like this. This is great.
Thank you. That's very encouraging.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
See you tomorrow. Have a good day.